Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Sudaso, and this is our weekly monk chat session, your opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism, and our opportunity to try to give useful replies. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll go through the questions that have been typed into the comments window. So if you would like your questions answered, go ahead and type them in at any time. And when I run out of questions, then we'll end the stream. So feel free to type in as much as you want. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. And hello to the people who have checked in online. So hello to Lydia, Kowser Friend, Mary, Richard, Maria, Gregory, and Sean. Welcome to all of you. And I see a couple questions already. So Kowser Friend says, I've been a bit upset lately. I feel like I've been wronged by someone. I know this is not a wholesome state of mind, and I try to practice metta. During practice, the feeling subsides, but it does return. Should I just practice more? Well, I mean, practicing more is generally speaking always a good idea. But if what we're doing is not working or it's not producing lasting results, then it might be worth re-examining what we're doing. And also examining, so what is this attitude that we're cultivating? So this attitude of holding some resentment towards someone on account of their past behavior. One thing which I find really useful is to recollect that virtually every single person we will meet throughout the entire course of our life, almost every single one of them is unenlightened, which means virtually every single person you ever meet is overcome by greed, hatred, and most importantly, delusion. So when somebody does something to wrong you, when somebody does something that you don't like or that you think is unwholesome or rude or even downright evil, you can remember this person is delusional. They're insane. They're like a wild rabid dog. They're like an animal that's completely deranged. So if you get bit by a wild dog, well, you're like, well, that's just the nature of a wild dog. Now, if you're bit by a snake, well, that's just the nature of a snake. Or again, if a crazy person yells something obscene at you, you're just like, well, that's just the nature of crazy people. Well, have that attitude towards every single person you meet. They do something you don't like, well, it's because they're crazy, quite literally. Anyone who's not enlightened is by definition crazy. By definition, they're insane. That means virtually every person you meet is insane, which means they're going to do crazy things. We should actually expect that. We should expect everyone we meet to act greedy, hostile, and delusional. Because realistically, virtually every person you meet is in fact going to be greedy, hostile, and delusional. It is unrealistic, phenomenally unrealistic, to expect people to be generous, kind, and wise. But if on occasion you actually do meet people who are generous, kind, and wise, then you can appreciate those qualities, but also expect them to act crazy every once in a while, because even the best people you meet are probably not fully enlightened. So I find that thinking in this way, then resentment naturally fades. Because one realizes that resentment is based upon an unrealistic expectation of other people. Okay, next question is from Richard. Richard says, the Buddha taught to check for things in order to make good decisions. Chandagati, dosagati, mohagati, and bayagati. So personal desire, hate, delusion, and fear. I don't understand the first one, chandagati, or personal desire, greed. I mean, when I want to make a Sedition? Out of hatred, it is easy to recognize it and stop me, but it's very difficult for me to recognize Chandagati. How to recognize Chandagati in my decision-making? Would Chandagati be related to laziness, perhaps? Be more easy to recognize if that would be the case. So, Richard, I think you're not quite understanding what these four things are talking about. So Chandagati, Dosagati, Mohagati, and Bayagati are talking about being biased by or motivated by Chanda, so desire, dosa, which is aversion, moha, delusion, and baya, fear. So the Buddha said when we are motivated by these four things, then our decision-making process is flawed. So if somebody is motivated by desire, then their decision-making process is going to be tainted by that. It means that they're going to be more inclined to make choices which support their greed. If somebody's motivated by aversion, biased by aversion, then their decision-making process, again, is not necessarily going to be rational and wise, but rather it's going to be biased by their aversion. Similarly with delusion and fear. So these are four mental conditions which prevent us from thinking clearly and prevent us from making wise, appropriate decisions. So the way to look at this is look at your decision-making process. When are you making a decision based on what you want or what you prefer or what you like, rather than on what is actually wise? And you'll see that actually we do this quite often. A great example of this actually is just when you're picking your food. It's like, well, this food would be healthy. This food would be delicious, but not so healthy. And watch the mind. You'll notice the mind is already leaning towards the one which is more tasty but less healthy. Why? Because it's biased by desire. It's biased by preference. So that's a very clear example of this. Another example might be, for example, if you're choosing co-workers or subordinates for a project, and there's two people who are maybe equally qualified to work on the project, but one of them you just don't like very much. Even though they're a perfectly good worker, you just don't like them very much. So you'll notice naturally you want to exclude them. Naturally, you don't want to pick them for the project. Naturally, you want to pick the other people, the ones that you don't have aversion towards. So again, your decision-making is biased by aversion. So you can see this in many different cases, but most commonly where this is mentioned by the Buddha is actually in reference to evaluating whether or not somebody is appropriate to make decisions. For example, in the monastic rules, we can appoint members of the monastic community to be responsible for certain areas of operation, like a monk who's in charge of assigning the housing, for example. And in the Vinaya, it says that we should not appoint a monk to an area of responsibility if we believe that they are biased by any of these four things. If we believe that their decision-making will be biased by desire, aversion, delusion, or fear, then they should not be appointed to that post. But we should try to be appointing people who will make impartial decisions, impartial and wise decisions. So it's the same in our own choices in life. We want to try to always make wise decisions, which are not influenced by our personal preferences, our desires, which is Chandagati, also not influenced by our aversion, which is the other aspect of personal preference, and not influenced by delusion. So delusion in this case means when we're not paying attention or we don't make an effort to investigate the situation, we don't really try to find out what's going on, or we just have a pre-existing opinion or belief and we don't actually check to see if that opinion or belief is true or not. So we just believe our opinions about things without investigating. And biased by fear is again, maybe we're afraid of a certain outcome, or we're afraid of a certain person, or we're afraid of something that might happen. So then that, again, breaks our impartiality, our ability to make wise decisions. So you want to watch out for that, and instead try to always make decisions based on impartiality and a wise understanding of what's right and wrong. So Mary says, lately I've been contemplating about suffering. I need to vent, but I find I hold back. How will that affect my practice? Bad things are steamrolling over me. I'm sorry to hear that you're having a hard time, Mary. But one thing that does help is that sometimes actually talking to another person, but try to explain what's going on for you from a third person perspective. Like try to get a little bit of distance. So just looking at what's arising in your heart as cause and effect, causes and conditions. So not taking it personally, but just seeing it as something natural. So again, you might tell someone like, oh, I've been feeling a lot of resentment lately because so-and-so said and did XYZ. Well, that's just an objective fact. You're just reporting the emotions that are arising in you and the conditions which you believe are contributing to that arising. And you can also observe. You can observe, oh, what is the wholesome component here? What is the unwholesome component here? Are there good things about this? Are there bad things about this? And also report that to whoever you're talking to. Report the wholesome aspects of what's going on in your heart and also the unwholesome aspects. So maybe somebody did something that you think is actually morally wrong and you're really upset about it. Well, actually, your ability to recognize right from wrong is a wholesome component of what's going on. So your ability to discern good and evil is wholesome. However, your hostility and resentment towards the person who did something morally wrong, that hostility and resentment is the unwholesome component. And that's what's causing you suffering. So being able to piece apart these components and report it clearly to whoever you're talking to, that can help you get some clarity around it. So there's another question here. Kauser Friend says, I think a second part of what keeps me in a negative spiral is worrying what I might have done wrong. I notice quite negative feelings towards myself, lots of worry. What are good reflections here? Well, I mean, the truth is we've all done lots of things wrong in the past. And we can't do anything about it because it's the past. That's actually one of the great things about the past is the fact that you can't do anything about it, which means you don't need to think about it at all. It's absolutely futile to think about the past because we can't change it. What we can do is we can make choices in the present moment that will change the future. That's useful. But reflecting on our past mistakes is utterly useless. Unless we're doing so to try to learn how to make better choices for the future, then it can be useful. But even then, it's useful to reflect on memories and stories of the past. Reflect on them as being stories about another person. Kind of like, remember as a child, there used to be fairy tales and nursery rhymes, which they were these kind of fantastic, far out stories, but they usually had some kind of moral lesson built into them. And so you weren't actually expected to believe the stories, but rather you were supposed to try to understand what the moral lesson was. So you can relate to your own memories in the same way. Relate to your own memories as being fairy tales. Relate to your own memories as being, again, nursery rhymes and fairy tales for helping you learn some kind of important moral lesson or helping you develop wisdom. But relate to the stories not as like, that is me, this is mine, this is who I am, this is the truth about me, but rather just relate to it as a story, which may or may not be true because actually often our memories are pretty distorted. But a story which might help you learn a little something about cause and effect and help you learn how to make better choices in the future. And again, you can't do anything about the past. So instead of worrying about the past, you just look to see, what can I do in the present moment that is good, that is wholesome, that is right, that is wise? And just keep doing that. Keep focusing on being a good person in the present moment. And then gradually, the mistakes of the past will fade away. And you'll just come to recognize that you are, in fact, a person committed to goodness. Okay, Gregory says, a non-Buddhist friend has recurring unwanted fearful thoughts and would like to try meditation. What practice might help if they don't have faith in the Buddha and Dhamma beyond materialist benefits? In that case, don't recommend that they practice Buddhism. It's utterly pointless. If they're not Buddhist and they're not interested in Buddhism, then don't recommend Buddhism. Send them to a therapist. It's probably what they really need. So meditation is not a substitute for therapy. So Buddhist meditation is part of the Buddhist path of attaining Buddhist awakening, Buddhist enlightenment. So Buddhist meditation is not a substitute for secular psychotherapy. And if somebody is having unwanted fearful thoughts, but they're not Buddhist, then I wouldn't recommend that they practice Buddhist meditation, because it's not going to be relevant to them. I mean, if they're interested in Buddhism anyway, and they want to learn about Buddhism anyway, and they want to learn how to practice Buddhism anyway, then yeah, they should learn. That's great. But if they just want some kind of therapy to help with their unwanted thoughts, well, yeah, Buddhist meditation might help a bit, but a lot of the power of Buddhist meditation is that it's part of this larger path which leads towards awakening. And if you just pick out little bits of it to try to treat fearful thoughts, it's really missing the point. Yeah, I mean, an example of this is that I remember many years ago, a senior monk was telling a story about how he had been given this very expensive and fancy tool. I don't remember exactly what it was. It might have been an electric screwdriver or something, but it was a expensive, fancy tool. And he was in a situation where he needed to pound some nails into a wall, but he didn't have a hammer close by. So he took this expensive tool and was using it to pound nails into the wall. And it's like, well, does it function that way? Kind of. And he actually admitted it wasn't really the best tool for the job. It was kind of okay, but it wasn't really the best tool for the job. But also it was a complete waste, like using like a $500 electric tool to pound nails into a wall. It was absolutely ridiculous. So it's the same. So Buddhism is an incredibly refined, advanced tool for a very specific purpose, which is attaining full enlightenment according to the Buddhist understanding. If you're using it just to be 10% happier, then again, that's like somebody taking a $500 woodworking tool and using it to pound nails. It's just absolutely ridiculous. There's much simpler, more straightforward tools for those sorts of things. The other thing is that a lot of the power of Buddhist practice comes from faith. Faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Sangha. And if you don't have that kind of faith, and you're not working on developing that kind of faith, then Buddhist practice loses most of its power. It just becomes another tool of, again, psychotherapy. And again, if somebody wants secular psychotherapy, they should just go to secular psychotherapy. And that sounds to me like that's what your friend actually wants. And if they want meditation-based secular therapy, there are, in fact, schools of meditation-based secular therapy these days. So I would just tell them to go to that. Now, if they're actually interested in Buddhism, then I am happy to help them learn Buddhism, but it sounds like they aren't. Okay, Richard says, how to deal with the fear of dying. The first time I donated blood and was afraid and my body became numb and I felt like dying. This experience made me feel more afraid of dying. What I feel afraid of is to lose my breath. Any advice, please? Well, the truth is that death is inevitable. So it's going to happen at some point anyway. One thing which is helpful to remember is that we've all died countless times already. We've died countless billions of times already. So it's actually not as big of a deal as we seem to think it is. We've already done it so many times. It's not really that different from falling asleep at night, or exhaling. It's not really that different. So we think it's going to be a big deal, but it's really not. We've done it before more times than we can remember. So when the time comes for your body to die, then you'll actually be okay. And the more you cultivate mindfulness and equanimity, the more you practice mindfulness of body and mind, the more you practice the recognition of impermanence and non-self, then the more prepared you'll be when the moment of death comes. Actually, one Buddhist teacher said that all of Buddhist practice is about learning how to die well. Because actually, death is when you start to realize that you can't hold on to anything. Uh, as a person approaches death, they usually start to become intensely aware that they have no choice but to let go of body and mind. And if somebody has not already trained themselves in letting go of body and mind, then the moment of death is incredibly scary. But in Buddhist practice, we're constantly training ourselves to let go of body and mind. We're constantly training ourselves to let go of everything. So then when the moment of death comes, we're just like, oh yeah, letting go of body and mind. I know how to do that. I've been doing that for years now. And then it's not such a big deal. So the more you practice mindfulness and equanimity, the more you practice um, the recognition of impermanence, the more you cultivate the recognition of non-self, then the less fear you'll have of death, because you'll realize that you're not going to lose anything at all when the moment of death comes. Okay, Anna Maria says, is, quote, Buddhists say, unquote, as bad as, quote, Buddha said, unquote, in terms of bad karma if we're not sure about the purity of the message? I think you're almost there. I think if you said some Buddhists say, or maybe many Buddhists say, then you've got a relatively true statement. Because, oh boy, if we start getting into differences of opinions between different Buddhists, well, we've got a lot to talk about. A lot of different opinions, not all of which accord with what the Buddha said. So yeah, actually saying something like, some Buddhists say X, Y, Z, other Buddhists have a different opinion, then that's actually a true statement. Or you can say something like, many Buddhists believe, da 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 da, and you might clarify, but some Buddhists have a different belief. Again, this is all perfectly reasonable. Then you're not misrepresenting the Buddha. Anna Maria says, what to do if someone that you know kills bugs in front of you? Well, it depends on your relationship with the person, and also on the circumstances. But I would say that it may be appropriate to, well, first off, if the person doesn't know, you might just gently tell them, like, as a Buddhist, we believe that it's inappropriate to kill any living being, even insects. And you might tell them, just as a personal favor, I would prefer it if you not kill insects in front of me. If you have a friendship with the person, then they might respect that request. If the person has a spiritual practice of some sort, then you might also try telling them, like, oh, in Buddhism, it's actually considered quite evil, quite morally wrong, quite bad karma to kill insects. So you might tell them that, well, maybe you should consider not killing them, removing them in a harmless way. If that person is interested in meditation practice, you can also point out how when we treat sentient beings with kindness and respect, then that makes our own mind more pure and happy. That makes it easier for us to cultivate a loving and peaceful heart. When we treat every single sentient being with a loving, peaceful attitude, then our own heart becomes more joyful and serene. So this is quite noticeable. The attitude of mind when we're angrily murdering insects is not a happy state of mind. Whereas the state of mind when we're gently, calmly sweeping up an insect and bringing it outside and letting it live its life outside instead of inside, for example, well, that's actually a much more beautiful and joyful and peaceful state of mind. So sometimes you can point out these things to the other person. But sometimes there's not really anything you can do to change the other person's behavior, in which case, what you can do is practice equanimity. Recognize that the other person is just acting out of their own delusion, and it's up to you whether or not you want to keep the peace of your own mind. And that if you cultivate anger and resentment towards the other person, then you're just corrupting your own mind. But if you practice mindfulness and equanimity, then your mind will remain peaceful and pure. And you can also wish, may this person develop the wisdom to know right and wrong. May they develop the restraint to not do what is wrong. May they develop the courage to do what is right. You might silently wish those things for that person. And that's the last question online. So if no other questions appear in a moment, then we might end with a short monk chat this evening. So that does look like it for now. So, oh no, there's another question here. Brian says, there are great horrors occurring in the world. How are we to know how and when to act to relieve the suffering of others? It's true, there are great horrors occurring in the world. There always have been and there always will be, because that is the nature of the world. The world is a horrible place, full of horrible things. That is its nature. It has never been otherwise and it never will be otherwise. That is the nature of samsara. Samsara, by its very nature, is an awful, corrupt place. It cannot be changed. So we also need to just accept that that's the nature of the world. The nature of the world is that it's full of awful things. However, we also have the opportunity to try to do good and to try to help others and to try to relieve the suffering of others. And when we see an opportunity, then it is good to make an effort. It's also good to go out of our way to seek opportunities to help others, to be of benefit to others. So those are all things which do help to purify your heart and also can help to uplift others as well. So it is worth doing it. This now does look like the last question, so we'll go ahead and conclude the stream at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.